appropriate for today's times. So anyway, I want to welcome you again to our webinar on emotional intelligence. In 1995, Daniel Goleman introduced the importance of emotional intelligence in society and the workplace in his best-selling book, Emotional Intelligence. He spread his word not just to American businesses, but globally. In a Egon Zenlander International study found 515 senior executives and an individual's emotional intelligence was proven to be better indicator of success than having strong technical skills, previous experience, and or an above average IQ. The good news is you can improve your emotional intelligence. Jennifer Zemecki and I have been working together for about 15 years. She's the founder and president of Well-Run Concepts Incorporated, a human resource consulting firm founded in 1997, whose mission is job matching and developing top talent. Jennifer has over 25 years of human resource experience. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Organizational Communication from Arizona State University and is a certified professional behavioral analyst, a values analyst, a DNA analyst, and has many other certifications as well. Jennifer's passion and finely tuned skills in the area of talent management has led her to be considered an expert and key advisor to CEOs and business owners worldwide. So with that being said, I hope you're ready to learn about your emotional intelligence, how you can help improve your emotional intelligence of yourself as well as your team. So Jennifer, it's all up to you.
Okay, thanks, Greg. And good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be back together, and we're going to have another exciting session on EQ. And what we're going to tackle today is, a couple of things. And I hope that the goal of this session is you're going to have at least 3 takeaways that you can implement to help yourself on your journey of increasing your emotional intelligence. So why should we learn about emotional intelligence? Well, as Greg mentioned, especially in the environment today, there's a lot of lack of emotional intelligence, which is leading to a lot of workplace issues, which is costing workplaces and people a lot. So we're going to first start off and we're going to learn about why. Well, why? EQ drives action. Emotions drive our behaviors. So when we talk about behaviors here, I'm not referring to the DISC model. I'm talking about how we react. So we need to know that. We need to be aware of that. We're going to learn about what's going to be our working model for EQ. We're going to go through that. I know a lot of you have taken the free profile today. I'm going to touch upon that. And how do we use the EQ in the workplace? I'm going to talk about that. And at least I want you to have a couple of takeaways about how you can increase your EQ. And I can tell you that EQ is directly tied to productivity, to sales, to motivation, which leads to engagement, collaboration, and teamwork. So hopefully one of those are of interest to you, either you personally or you who manage a team. So let's get started with our traditional focus has always been, this iceberg. Teams, leaders, executives, they tend to focus on the top side of the iceberg. HR, they're looking at competencies, they're looking at skills, they may even look at behaviors, and in this regard, I mean DISC. They're also looking maybe at personal motivators. But none of those actually tell us about our emotional intelligence. That's all kind of under the surface. And we need to have high levels of self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. That's what's required for long-term success. Now, I don't know about you, but have you ever worked with anyone who was maybe highly skilled, highly technically skilled, maybe they were also highly intelligent people, but they still failed at their job. Well, it probably has to do with what's below the surface. It probably has to do with EQ. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but there's quite a bit of change in the global marketplace. And this has been going on, and we've been studying EQ for over 20 years now. But why it becomes more and more important to learn about it, both as an individual and an organization today, is because of the lack of consistency in our environment. I don't know about you, but the speed of change is lightning fast, and it keeps getting faster with the more and more technology that comes in. And we also seem to have a global increasing uncertainty. And these are all leading to reasons of why we need to be aware of our EQ, because it predicts how people will react in different situations. And I'm sure we could all benefit from knowing that. Greg, I'm going to take a pause here. Is there any questions or any comments you want to make before I move on to the model?
Yeah, and appreciate it. And I was going through my notes and actually realized I left off a few important items, housekeeping items. You know, we will be providing everybody a copy of Jennifer's handouts in a day or two, so you can keep this on file for future reference. And also, if you stay to the end of the webinar today, we're going to provide a few other freebies and discounts if you're interested in expanding your emotional intelligence knowledge. So, but you have to stay to the end. We try not to be, we don't want to be salespeople or doing pitches or something, because we specialize in value and content. But one of the questions that have come up along the way is, because emotional quotient is pretty important today, particularly with all the things going on in the world about the work environment. I mean, we also hear a lot about people burning out, not being happy with the jobs. What do you think EQ can do with burnout?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, Greg, because I'm recently just read 2 books on burnout. And I see a direct correlation between EQ, the development of EQ, your understanding of your own emotional intelligence, and burnout. A couple of good books, if anybody's interested. One is called Fried, one is called High Octane Women, another one is Overdrive. And if we're not aware of our emotional intelligence, it is going to burn us out. And that spells disaster. Disaster for your health, your mental health. And I will tell you that women are especially prone to burnout. So, if anyone out there listening to this is feeling burned out, EQ is a great place to start. And it really ties in with engagement and motivation, or lack thereof. So it's a really important component. I'm glad you brought that up, Greg.
Sure, no problem. There's several other questions that are coming in, but why don't you just go ahead and pick up, and we'll pause again and ask some of these other questions.
Okay, so let's get to our model. Let's understand the importance of EQ in decision making. And how does this tie in our everyday life, whether it be at work, whether it be at home making decisions? Well, first of all, you have an emotional response. That's the first thing that happens. And then you have a cognition. A cognition is a thought. From that thought becomes an impulse. So when we see behavior here, I'm not talking about disc or style. I'm talking about a physical reaction. This is all happening at, of course, lightning speed. And then it goes through your level of competence. So the higher skilled you are in EQ, the better your decision making is going to be. Because the outcome is either going to be superior decision making or bad decision making. It's really one or the other. And I've come, after studying this for 20 years, my own definition of EQ is your ability to apply your emotions to either a positive or negative outcome. It can't be both. How you manage your emotions is going to be a positive thing for you and other people, or it's going to be a negative thing for you or other people. It can't be both. So a more academic definition for EQ, this one's by Cooper. There's many out there, but I like this one because it speaks to that EQ is the ability to sense and understand and apply the power of emotions to facilitate. What do we want? We want high levels of collaboration and productivity. So again, that's kind of a mouthful, but EQ is in direct relationship to how we make decisions. And I'm sure you can think about, if any of you shop and make spontaneous purchases, you can see how your emotions ties in to your decision making and your buying. So let's move on if you don't have another question there, Greg. And you mentioned Daniel Goleman. He was kind of the forefather. He brought emotional intelligence. He was a professor at Harvard at the time, the mid-1990s, and he brought it out of academia and into the business world. And he showed us that emotional intelligence is a huge part of success in senior leadership. In fact, he put a percentage of 90% of star performers are high in EQ. And I can tell you, Greg, for having coached executives for over 20 years, that this is absolutely true. So what I'm saying here is the higher your EQ, the more chance you have to be successful, not only in your workplace, but in your life. And I can also tell you from having worked with senior executives that there is not a correlation between your position and your emotional intelligence score. I have seen very low-level staff members have very high levels of EQ. And I have seen very senior CEOs with very low EQ. Okay? So that's kind
more
of
often than you ever think.
Well, there's actually a study, and I can actually say that I believe this study is accurate. Some of the highest emotional intelligence scores we see in middle management, supervisory and middle management, because they're the ones that are having to deal with things coming at all sides. Now, of course, if there's any CEOs on the line, they're going to love to disagree with me on this, but that's okay. Because the higher you go up, the more support you have, the more isolated you become, and the less you need to be using your emotional intelligence on a daily basis. But when you're on the front lines and you're in the thick of it your entire day, that can really build your emotional intelligence, or of course, if it's not high, that can really derail you and lead to some performance problems.
Yeah, I have a question, Jennifer, and a story, and then have my question. So, Jennifer and I were doing a workshop with a group of attorneys, prosecutors, and went through the workshop, and one of the individuals come up to us and says, he says, well, now you explain why I have an employee turnover problem in my office. And his EQ was quite low, and he just didn't have the temperament to be, approachable and communicative with his team. And when he would get frustrated, because he also had a high D score and a very low I score, just get very frustrated. So many of his employees would just quit. So I guess the question is, if you have a situation like that, what advice would you have given that prosecuting attorney on what he should do first to improve his emotional intelligence?
Well, we start with an EQ report and we take a look at his scores. And we're going to see that his scores were probably pretty low. And then I'm going to ask him the $1 million question, which is, do you want to do anything about this or not? Because unless he decides that he wants to improve it, nothing's going to change. He's going to continue to react in the way that he always has. But if he says, yes, I really want to change this, I really want to improve, I don't want to be, this isn't my intention to upset people, I don't want to have this turnover, then we'd go about working on it. And I'm sure over time, if he does focus on it, you will see improvement. Because the good news is emotional intelligence, unlike IQ, which cannot be changed, your EQ can. It can improve.
Good. Thanks for that answer. In his case, he wasn't going to get reelected as a district attorney unless he changed.
Well, back to my quote here, this 90%, I would say 90% of the senior executives that have come to me or have been referred to me for coaching, it was an EQ problem. It was not a leadership problem. It was not a DISC issue. It was a lack of emotional intelligence that led them to need the coaching.
Yeah, unless it reaches a point like we're seeing in the with these well-known media and politicians where there is no path of return. You're just going to be paying lawsuits out of the wazoo.
Right. Well, I think what's happened is we've come to a place in time where low EQ is no longer going to be tolerated. I think it's been tolerated in the workplace for a long time. And actually a lot of it's been blamed on DISC, saying, oh, well, they're just a high D, they fly off the handle, they're a low I, they don't know how to talk to people, and we've been talking about DISC for years, when really it's not DISC, because you can have a high D with high emotional intelligence and it's going to look completely different than a high D with low emotional intelligence.
Excellent point. I think we're at a paradigm shift right now.
Yes. So anything that you can do to develop your EQ is a cutting edge advantage. Remember, Greg, we did this webinar, last spring on millennials and EQ, right?
Right.
And my number one advice to the millennials is there's not much you can do about your age and all these other things, but what you can do is improve your EQ and you will get there faster.
Exactly.
Okay, well, I think I'm going to jump into the model here, and because I know there's people on the call wondering about what do those 5 factors mean. So if you have looked at your graph page, and there's also a wheel page in the back of your report that looks like this, I'm going to run through the 5 factors. We use the TTI report. There are other profiles out there for EQ, but this is the one that we feel is the most applicable. If we're most able to implement this, I should say, in business, because it's an easy transition and it doesn't get too much into, I would say, too much into psychology. And so we like using this profile, and we're measuring 5 factors. And you can see the 3 on the top that are orange, the intrapersonal, the self-awareness, self-regulation, and motivation have to do with self. The bottom purple, interpersonal, have to do with others, empathy and social skills. So one of the questions people always ask me is, where do I begin? Well, we always begin with self-awareness. Everybody wants to say, oh, well, I want to build social skills. I want to have good relationships. I want to have a big network. and they try to start with social skills, or they say, oh, my wife told me I have to improve my empathy, so I want to improve my empathy. Well, we can't start at the bottom of the wheel. The only place that we can start to develop is with self-awareness. Because the key is, first of all, to understand yourself, your moods, your emotions, how that drives your behavior. But here's the big key, and this is the key that most people miss in self-awareness. They say, oh, I'm aware of my behavior. Oh, I know what I said. I know how I acted. I know how I reacted. But they do not have a clue as to how it affected other people. So those of you looking to how can I increase my self-awareness, you need to pay attention to how others are reacting, how it's affecting others. That's the key to self-awareness. I mean, that's the key of a place to start. So then when we move to self-regulation, self-regulation is really about learning how to control yourself. It's learning to manage your impulses. So just because you think something doesn't mean you have to say it. Just because you feel something doesn't mean you have to experience it. You know, I feel like doing this. I feel like doing that. Yeah, you can feel that, but that doesn't mean it has to translate into action or into words. And that's the key to self-control. And that's what there's a lot of lack out there. And that's what you're seeing currently in the media with all these cases rolling around.
Well, I think
Now,
it's also true of a lot of situations coming out of Washington today about shooting from the hip without getting your facts together. I won't be political, so because we certainly don't want to mix politics with this.
right, but self-regulation is a key. It's a key actually to happiness, and it's a key to good relationships. So again, when you want to improve your social skills, you need to start with self-awareness and self-regulation. That's going to go a long way in building effective relationships, whether it be business or personal. Now, the third one, motivation, is where it all kind of, motivation, it's a piece of the pie here, but really in the next slide, you'll see I put motivation in the middle. It's kind of like the bullseye because everything has to go through the motivation. You have to be motivated. That's why I said, if that district attorney wasn't motivated to change, nothing's going to change about his EQ. So this is where you have a passion to pursue your goals with energy. Remember, I talked about burnout. That comes into play here. This is about grit. You know, there's books about grit, tenacity, resiliency. All of that is tied up in this emotional factor that we're looking at here in motivation. This is if you won the Powerball today, you know, what are you going to do with your time? You know, what are you going to do with your talent if you didn't have to work for money or status?
So are you, let me, sorry, interrupting Jennifer, but when you're looking at that motivation piece of the pie, does that mean the assessment shows you if this person is motivated to improve or not motivated to improve?
Yes, emotionally. And now I'll clarify for those of you on the call that use the personal engagement motivation assessment that we use. This isn't measuring that. That's measuring what do you value and how do you see the world. But it's not really talking about the emotional component. This measurement is emotionally, how motivated are you? And I will tell you, and this is why I'm studying burnout, because I see a tremendous amount of executives who score low on motivation. Now, that's very strange because you say, how do we have an executive who's not even motivated? I mean, what's going on here? Well, he or she may have been motivated at some point in time to get them there, but currently they're burned out. Currently, they're not motivated. They're working for money and status, but they're not working because they love what they're doing. Now, I'm not saying everybody, I'm saying I see this, and this is why we need to study motivation.
Right. Yeah, and to me, I mean, even if you decide if you wanted to use this report for hiring situations, this provides you a powerful suite of information on what this person's future performance is going to be.
Yes, now I got to give you a disclaimer there, Greg. With the TTI tool, it is not validated to be used in selection. So we can't use the EQ, or we're not advised to use the EQ this assessment. However, we have workarounds to that because we can pull EQ out of the personal skills. So we can still get some of this information. And then we do recommend to use it in the onboarding. You know, once they're hired, they take the EQ profile and we see. So, and also remember that any HR people and any hiring managers on the call, we come up with very powerful EQ interviewing questions that can give us this answer.
That's important. Thanks for the clarification.
Yeah, so that's kind of a workaround. Hopefully it will pass, you know, that pre-employment step like we have with the DISC and the motivators to be used and the personal skills. But until then, we have a workaround that is quite successful.
Yeah, thanks. And this might be a good jumping off point to sort of clarify with the folks on the call today on what are the different types of assessments we primarily use in our practices. And because I know there's a lot of people that use DISC and there are people that have used motivators, and now we're introducing the emotional quotient assessment. Can you sort of tie all those three together?
Yes, you know, I'll call it the science of self, because let's think about the body. The EQ, I think, is the core of the person, of the being. So it's kind of like the heart, you know, and then the EQ kind of goes through the person's values. That's their, you know, motivators profile. And that's kind of like their passion for living. And then it goes out through the body to like our hands and our feet, which is how we do our work in our life. And that's the DISC. So we can kind of think about it, you know, the DISC is the outward signs that we see. It's the how. The motivators is the why. But the core is our emotions. And that's kind of the heart.
Right. And yeah, because, you know, DISC, you know, which we train people and certify people, is DISC shows how you behave, right? Your behaviors, you know, how quick do you respond to problems, how direct or introverted or extroverted you are. Motivator shows, you know, why you do things in your life, what engages you, what disengages you, what creates job satisfaction. And then the EQ just shows, you know, if you could, Jennifer, make a one sentence statement. When you look at both DISC and motivators, what do you see as the biggest value EQ brings?
Well, here's what I've come to understand after studying all three of those, as you know, for over 20 years. The DISC is very important, and the DISC is most important in communication. I would not use DISC only in job matching or in interviewing. So if there's any HR managers out there, or there's any hiring managers, if you're only using DISC to hire, you're probably not getting the best view of the individual. You absolutely need to add the motivators to that piece. But the EQ, the value that it brings is it's a huge piece of performance that really DISC isn't about performance. It's more about communication, because you can do a job whether you're a DIS or C, you may not be well matched to it, but you can still do it because you can adapt your behavior. But you can't adapt your EQ. You either have it or you don't. And you also can't adapt your motivators. You're either value that or you don't.
Got it. Okay.
All right, so let's.
Questions are still rolling in, but we still have time. It's 2 o'clock, and I think we sort of decided we would probably end today about 2:15 or so.
Yes. So I'll kind of finish up the model here, and then we'll take some more questions. So we've been talking about the self on the top half of the wheel. Now we get to the bottom half of the wheel. And the empathy is huge. The empathy is about, do you understand other people? It's not a measurement of, do you value other people? It's, do you understand them? Can you see the world through their eyes? Can you walk in their shoes? I can tell you that, again, what's the value of EQ? If you're in sales, if you're in customer service, if you're a nurse, I mean, if you don't have high levels of empathy, you're in the wrong job. I mean, you have got to develop this skill, this emotional skill, if you want to be successful in certain jobs. So not all jobs call for empathy. So when we look at jobs and we look at matching people to the job, no, you don't, and not every job needs high empathy, but certain jobs, it's absolutely mission critical. And I do a lot of work in nursing and in the area of holistic admissions for nurses at universities, and empathy is one of the things that we measure. So, where are we, how else would we know that? We need to get that from this assessment. Because everybody will tell you their empathy, that they're empathetic, including my own husband.
I wasn't going to go there with that.
Yeah, so everyone thinks they have high empathy, but what they think in reality may be two different things. So let's end up with social skills here. This is our ability to have meaningful relationships. This is what organizations want. They want highly collaborated teams. They want team orientation. But this doesn't just happen. And we could be training, we could be doing team building all day long. We could actually be doing a lot of DISC training, a lot of communication training. But unless we pull in this EQ piece of social skills, we're not going to get the target. We're not going to get to where we need to be. Okay, so let's look at the model this way. And excuse the slide, there's a couple of words off here, but you get the point. At the bottom is where we need to start, awareness. So you first want to say, how am I feeling? How are they feeling? It all has to drive through the motivation to lead to our action. And then you ask, how did I react? And how did I see them react? One of the takeaways that I want everyone to get in tune with is taking their emotional temperature. You need to be checking in with yourself constantly. How am I feeling? Am I feeling clear? Clear is, if it's a glass of water, the glass of water is crystal clear. Clear means calm. Think green, calm, serenity. But if your glass of water is cloudy right now, that means it's affecting your thinking, it's affecting your decision making, it's affecting how you feel. You're feeling tense, you're feeling upset, your body's feeling red, it's feeling tense. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a direct correlation with EQ and health. So how you manage your stress ties back to how aware you are of all of these things that are going on in your body, whether you know it or not. Okay, another way, this is kind of wrapping up the model here. So now what we did was we took that model and we overlaid the 5 components that we're measuring. So again, we start in the bottom left, our self-awareness. So a lot of people say, oh, self-esteem, it's a big issue. And there's, how do I increase my self-esteem? Well, I can tell you that there is a direct correlation, a positive correlation between high self-esteem and high self-awareness. So if you have a low self-awareness, there's a strong chance you're going to have low self-esteem, which means that you don't really understand yourself, therefore you don't really value yourself. So as you increase your self-awareness, you're going to be able to increase your self-esteem, which is how do you value yourself? And that doesn't mean we're not talking about becoming a narcissist. We're talking about being able to understand yourself, how you're feeling, and how it is going to impact others. So then we move up the chain to our self-management. So we have self-awareness, self-management. That's the regulation. So now what are you going to do about it? How are you going to control yourself? How are you going to control your reactions? And everything, like I said, drives through that motivation. Why are you doing it? Why should they do it? So you're always thinking of self and others. Notice here on this slide, the blue is self, the blue is self, and then the purple. So you're looking at both. Why would I do it? Why would they do it? And then the empathy is really how aware are we socially? So how is everyone else feeling? How is this impacting everyone else? What I just said in this meeting, how is it impacting other people? It's either impacting them positively or negatively. That's what leaders need to know. That's what leaders need to know about EQ. And if I was in HR, I was in HR before I started this business 20-something years ago, we didn't have EQ back then because it was the mid-1990s. And boy, I wish I had this in HR because this was so important. This was going on, but we didn't know how to articulate it. Now we have a model to use. So social skills is our social management. And again, this is going to be then, do I have positive or negative outcomes? Do I have positive or negative relationships? Okay, I'm going to pause there, and then we only have a couple more slides. We're going to wrap up with kind of an action plan. So any other questions rolling in, Greg?
Well, several, and I probably won't have time to cover all of them, but I did have someone send me I guess it's sort of a statement, maybe a question, but and I can answer this as well, but because I can answer it and do it in 15 minutes, but we don't have that time. But he says, I would think that leadership or management should have a high level of empathy. Yeah. is
the operative word.
When you've been around the field as long as we have, and you work with senior level people, yeah, you would think they do, but many do not. And it sort of depends on the job. And as I said earlier, I think we're going through a paradigm shift today in the workplace when it comes to senior level people and their intentions and their leadership skills. Is if you're working as a general manager or leader, yeah, I think you should have a high level of empathy. But if you're a sales manager and you're being held accountable by your boss, it's all about numbers, right? Making those numbers, making those sales. And if you're too empathetic, then you're going to be tolerating people who are not performing to standards. So it all depends on the position. That's my short answer. You may want to add something else to that, Jennifer. And believe me, we all have worked with a lot of senior level people who have absolutely no empathy, and that just cascades down the line.
Yes, it's a great goal. I mean, really, the operative word there, like I said, is should, because they should, but that's far from reality. And if I was in HR, I would make sure that my senior level team was getting training. In fact, if I was in HR, I would be getting training certification myself so that I could roll out training to the senior level, and then I would take it down from there, senior level to the management level to the supervisory level. That then you could really breed a organization with high levels of empathy. And that would be good for the employees, that would be good for the business, that would be good in the long run for sales and profitability.
Exactly. But, if you need specific advice, you can always contact Jennifer or myself, and we'll be glad to give you a more detailed answer.
Sounds good.
I don't know, for sake of time, I'm going to skip this one. I was going to ask you, since you brought it up, do women have higher EQ than men? So I don't know if you want to touch that, but you did bring something up about your husband. So,
yes.
And we still want to have time to cover the other offers we're going to provide as well.
I'll give you the short answer. The overall score for men and women is the same, but women score higher on empathy and men tend to score higher on motivation. That's the short answer.
Thank you.
Okay, well, let's flip
We should have
through.
a webinar just on that, right?
Yes, we would have lots to talk about. So hopefully, for those of you who are looking to increase your EQ, as I mentioned, you need to start with your self-awareness. So here's 3 strategies, 3 takeaways that I hope that you start with. First of all, you don't want to be thinking of your feelings as good or bad. You think of them as they are, okay? But remember this, they're feelings. And just because you feel it doesn't make it true. Okay? So that will help you when you start thinking of your feelings differently. Your feelings aren't you. Okay? You're just having a feeling about it. And also, you need to learn to experience your emotions physically. This ties into what I was talking earlier about, are you feeling clear or cloudy? Are you feeling red or green? Where are you holding tension in your body? And that ties in directly with your health and how you manage stress, which is also a component of self-regulation. And then you need to start with awareness. You need to start journaling about your patterns throughout the day. What are your triggers? Is it certain people? Is it certain places? Is it events? Is it situations? Is it different times of the day? When you start journaling and you keep a journal for a month, you will be amazed to see what once you went through with your emotions, and that's going to help you start developing it. Okay, so let's move on. I think we covered this because, we, with TTI, we really look at behaviors, we look at personal skills, we look at motivators, we look at emotional intelligence. So those kind of are our science of self, our 4. So I think we covered that. I think I really covered how do we use this. We talked about, we coach people, we use it in sales. We talked about selection, so we got to use it in interviewing questions. Team development, we want to have performance evaluations tied in with some EQ measurements. So I think we pretty much covered that. And I want you to take a moment now and make sure you write down your 3 to 5 insights that you got from today, any tips or anything you want to follow up with. And then I think, Greg, we can move to the offers for today.
Great. And if you have any other questions, anybody on the call, just, write out your question, email it to us. If we don't have a chance to answer it today, either Jennifer or myself will contact you separately with the answer that you're looking for. Well, as I said at the beginning of the webinar, we try to provide a high value. The assessment we provided you is $100, and we're having a few things we'd like to do for you in addition to providing you that free report. For the first person who emails me right now, will get a free 30-minute debriefing from Jennifer, who will go over your report for 30 minutes and provide you additional insight on what you might need to do or think about. Also, if you want to buy 20 or more reports for your organization, we'll provide you a 20% discount off that regular price. And you also will get a free debriefing from Jennifer as well as part of that deal. Um, uh, and the other thing is we also provide, or Jennifer provides, a certification training program over the web on emotional quotient assessment. And we think every person, at least one person in every organization, should have someone certified who can really administer this and be able to coach others as well on their assessment. And we're providing you $100 off that certification cost. The regular cost of that certification program is $1,695. So anyway, hopefully that's something that's beneficial to you. And that's what I wanted to cover. Several of you have emailed me about technical problems, or you didn't get a copy of your EQ report or something along that line. I will respond to all those issues in the next day or two, hopefully today, if not tomorrow. We did shut off the link to the assessment at 12:30 today. So anyway, feel free to contact us. Jennifer, would you, good, you have your website there. You can, did you want to tell them what your email address is?
Sure, you can just email me, Jennifer at thatwell-run.com.
Great. And like I said, I only work with people that have tremendous knowledge, integrity, and Jennifer's one of those few people that you want to make a friend and colleague with, because she knows what she's doing. And anything you find over the internet is buyers beware. You just never know what they're going to be trying to do to you. But anyway, hopefully you'll continue to get our Navigator newsletter. And I appreciate your time today. Hopefully you've learned something new. And I don't see if there's any, let me check, see if there's any other questions. I got several thank yous. Appreciate it. Interesting. Great. So I'm going to stop the webinar at this time. Anything else you want to say, Jennifer?
No, I just want to thank you, Greg, for having me on for another engaging discussion about EQ. And I hope everybody takes advantage of some of these offers and really starts to work on their EQ.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we hope you have a great holiday season, and we'll talk to you somewhere down the road.